Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil, Jared Mack. Jared live from the Big House from Oregon's 38-17 victory over the Michigan Wolverines, defending national champions. A game in which Oregon rolled up nearly 500 yards of total offense, 470 to be exact, held Michigan to under 300 yards, dominated on first down, dominated on third down, had 20 more total, or almost 20 plays more than Michigan, dominated time of possession, had just one turnover. It looked dicey in the third quarter, like maybe Michigan could make some kind of a comeback, but then Oregon put the foot on the pedal and just kind of mowed over Michigan late in the fourth for the final score of 38-17. Don't want to say it's like ho-hum, but another win, another impressive win in which you feel like Oregon played well for most of it, had spurts where they didn't, and yet they walked away with a fourth quarter with little anxiety to win this game, 38-17.
Yeah, I mean, the third quarter problems were another problem. I'm still not overly convinced that it's a real issue. But again, it kind of reared its head going into this game. But again, it was a 28-10 halftime lead. Oregon scored on 4 of their first 5 drives with just the 1 3-and-out, a punt. That didn't go so well. And they dominated the first half. It really wasn't even like close. Michigan's lone touchdown came off of a Ryan Pelham muff punt where Michigan took over at the 28. Davis Warren had a great throw on 3rd and goal from the 7-yard line to give him a touchdown, but that very easily could have been another drive that ended in a field goal. I just think it was a domination, especially in the first half. Like Matt said, the third quarter got a little hairy, but again, they kind of found their rhythm here or there in the fourth quarter and scored again. So scored twice. So I don't know. I thought it was a really good game from Oregon, and people are going to point at the negative stuff in the third quarter, but I think you should look at the bigger picture and see that they dominated a team that's full of real talent that just doesn't have a quarterback, and that's been obviously Michigan's problem. We talked about that a lot pregame. It reared its head again today, but that was a really good team that they just kind of manhandled in that first half, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's just do the third quarter thing because I know that's what everybody wants to hear about. I thought this third quarter was similar results based upon how they performed than we've seen recently, but I felt like it was different because of the caliber of opponent. Like I don't want to blow too much smoke up Michigan because they're now 5-4, and this isn't what this team was supposed to be this year. But I thought you saw a championship team from a year ago with a lot of pride play its best in that third quarter and give everything it could to possibly make this interesting late. And as you said, Jared, Oregon had such a lead in the first half that I think everybody kind of knew what the ultimate result was going to be besides the people in Michigan's locker room. And I give them a lot of credit for fighting like crazy in that third quarter. You go back and watch the reasons it wasn't successful. Obviously, Oregon has something to do with it, but Michigan just threw the kitchen sink out there. Like they gave everything they could in that third quarter. Obviously, partway into the fourth quarter, that final drive, Oregon gets the stop in the red zone. And I thought that was really impressive. But I know some people expect perfection and Oregon's going to blow everybody out of the water. You're still facing Michigan in the Big House, a team that doesn't want to lose like this on their home field when, the crowd's booing them at halftime. And that's just the reality of this. This is a team that was really motivated in that second half. And I thought you saw for a quarter them really outplay Oregon. And that was, I think, more of a credit to them than it was to Oregon, playing a poor quarter. Do I think it was their best football of the season? Absolutely not. I think we saw some of their best football in the first half. But that third quarter, to me, I think was just as much about Michigan as it was Oregon. And the last thing I'll say here is if people are really frustrated with this one, and this is the most lopsided home game that Michigan has had since 2020. This is a team that doesn't lose at home, and Oregon just beat them by 21 points. I know they added a little something there at the end with the touchdown with a minute to go, and I know that inflates the score a little bit, but this was still a very dominant game, and it's not really a surprise based upon how this game was played, I think, in its totality that Oregon was able to cover and win by 21. So I know there's going to be people that are frustrated and maybe some disappointment with the way that third quarter played out. I totally get it. They were outscored again. They've only scored, I think it's now 6 points in the last 6 third quarters. That's a bad stat. At the same time, I felt like this one was just a little different because of the caliber of opponent they had. It's supposed to be a championship team, though, and they didn't put their foot down in the third. And so you can be frustrated. I just also think you have to give credit to Michigan for kind of giving it everything they have there.
Should note, first drive of the game for Oregon, Tez Johnson goes down with an injury. And then in the fourth quarter, I think it was, Marcus Harper goes down with an injury. Neither guy returned. Tez was spotted on the sideline in street clothes with a sling on his right arm. It looked like Harper had a heavy ice pack on his. Jared, what's the latest from Dan post-game, if anything, on the status of those two guys? Because that's going to be a big question moving forward for this team.
Yeah, that'll be the main talking point kind of going forward. Just another, again, more injury stuff with Oregon. It was Birch and Ferguson who both came back, were full players today, did the thing. But yeah, Tez goes down in the first quarter. Looked like a right shoulder problem. I know CBS was telling the viewers and the listeners that it was like maybe a shoulder issue, maybe a collarbone issue. Dan basically didn't say a lot. He just said they're still figuring out. He doesn't have any details right now. Just that he wasn't able to come back into the game. So that'll be something that we'll ask about on Monday, and then probably again on Wednesday, because he's a pretty intricate part of this offense, to say the least. And for Harper, a lesser known but still very intricate part of this offense. Dan said that Harper told him in post game that in the locker room that he was fine. This looked like a left leg injury, or at least that's again what CBS said, a left knee injury that he wasn't able to return to the game. Kavika Rogers filled in for him. But Dan, again, it said that he wants to continue to assess and take a look and all that other stuff, where, again, this will be another Monday question, just because he was on the bench. He never really went back to the locker room. He went to the medical tent. And then after he was, diagnosed, or they did something to him, like, he just sat there in the medical tent for the rest of the game. So it wasn't that he, went to the locker room and got undressed and came out in street clothes. He just didn't go back into play. So maybe that's a good sign. Maybe further testing will prove that it wasn't a good sign. It was just a bad injury, but we won't know until Monday, maybe. We probably won't know until next Saturday when they take the field and somebody is or is not in uniform, but we'll see. But still, Oregon had a lot of guys step up, and especially in Tez's absence with Trayshawn and Justice Lowe. Again, career days for both of them. First 100-yard game for Holden, first 6-catch game for Justice Lowe, who's still stepping up in a big role. Didn't really miss too much of a beat, but you could tell at points that Oregon's offense was missing Tez for sure.
As you said, such an integral part of this thing, and I do think there were a couple of opportunities in the third quarter to kind of put the foot down, and there were third down throws, and that's kind of been Tez's involvement in the game oftentimes, is coming through in those big moments. And ultimately Trayshawn came through in the fourth, but I was watching a couple of those third down plays going like, man, I wonder what the difference would be with just having Tez and the reliability he has and his ability to catch it a couple of yards short of the sticks, make a guy miss and still convert. I thought that was something that was maybe missing as part of that third quarter, but it's really hard to be critical of the way you mentioned Trayshawn, you mentioned Justice, Evan Stewart, just the way those guys responded. I thought Ferg, by the way, and Sadiq had some really nice moments. Ferg almost got that tight end touchdown streak off the books. They haven't scored one all year. I don't know if fans are aware of that. It was inches, very, very close from doing it. But I thought, you lose your All-American slot receiver on the first series of the game, and you still have 294 pass yards. You basically salt the game away with the pass game in the fourth quarter. Like, week after week, we've now seen, whether it be Birch going down in Mateo's emergence, or whether it be Ferguson going down and Sadiq and Herbert stepping up, but you just see the ability this team has in its depth to kind of fill in. I just thought today was another great example of that. And we'll see long-term though. I mean, Matt, like, let's be real. Like, this is a really big part of this offense. And if he's out for an extended period of time, which if it is a serious shoulder injury, that will be the case, they're going to be forced to reshuffle. And while I don't necessarily think that'll cost them anything in the regular season, I do think you have to, if you're looking big picture, this could be something that's pretty significant. And we can get to Kavika Rogers and how that looked if we want. But let's stick with the receivers here, Matt. Like, where was your head at watching this offense today? And kind of where's your head at going forward without Tez if he's not available for the rest of the regular season?
Well, I don't think I was too overly concerned today, and I won't be concerned the rest of the way, because they should be able to beat Maryland and then at Wisconsin and then after by Washington at home without Tez Johnson in the passing game. But you're right. Like, if they play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, which we're pretty close to Oregon locking in a spot for that, that becomes a concern, because it was the dual threat ability of, hey, you've got two guys on each side, and Evan Stewart and Tez, who could break one at any moment. That becomes a big concern here. But I will say, like, Justice Lowe continues to show improvement in playmaking ability given the opportunities. Like Trayshawn Holden had a career game today. He stepped up huge in place of Tez, but we should also note, like, he's lost his starting spot. It's Lowe's. He's taken the spot from him after he got suspended for the Purdue game and hasn't shown any reason to give it back up. Now, I think Holden's the better playmaker, and we saw that today. The third down catch on the first third down catch of that final drive by Oregon's offense was a thing of beauty, and then the scramble ability to get open for the 42-yarder was huge, and he could have had a touchdown if Dylan Gabriel hit him in stride, but it was a little underthrown in the second quarter for another big catch. But he's the guy that's going to have to step up, and he's capable of it. It's just going to be, can he do it consistently? And I think that's probably been his, I guess, X factor in his career is he's had moments where it's flashed like it has tonight, where he's a dynamic game-changing receiver, but then the next game or the next two games, he kind of disappears. But maybe we'll see with the urgency and season coming to a close and his career, coming to a close, at least at the collegiate level. You typically sometimes see these seniors kind of rise to the occasion more consistently. We'll see there. But short term, the next three games, Tez cannot play and Oregon will be fine. But if we're talking playoffs or Big Ten championship, you get a little worried about how are they going to scheme him open. We might see more Kenyon Sadiq too, like his playmaking ability.
Yeah, for sure. I feel the same way, where I wouldn't say that Oregon would need Tez Johnson to win all those games. I think they have the talent and the offensive superiority to do so. It showed its head today at points too, just because, the start of the game, Oregon's first couple of plays were all just like quick hitters to the outside. And I talked about this during the week, where it's like, I want to see how they scheme against Michigan's interior and just their defensive line in general. And that's what they seem to be doing to start the game. And they did that with Justice too, who I was, pleasantly surprised with his playmaking in space as well. So I think that's something that might be highlighted in the next couple weeks. Next game, maybe never again, because Tez Johnson is fine. But if he is out, then I think, I would expect Justice to be a bigger part. I'm interested to see if they would expand the rotation a little bit more. If there's, Gary Bryan ever gets healthy enough, if they go to Jeremiah McClellan or Ryan Pelham, who may never be seen from again with his muff punt, but it'll be an interesting storyline to watch for sure. I thought, Dylan Gabriel talked after the game. He was he was really, really proud of Trayshawn and the way that he's grown as an individual since his incident against Ohio State. I thought those were pretty powerful words. Dylan even swore during the press conference, which I was kind of taken aback by, because he's very cognizant of what he's saying at all times. If you watch any of the interviews, he knows what he's saying. He takes time to answer questions, but he let it rip. And, he was really proud of him. And I think that was kind of like it felt like an overall sentiment from the team, where after that incident, Trayshawn's grown into a different type of person. So, and it might have unlocked him in tonight's game or today's game. So we'll see about his progress moving forward as well.
Yeah, it was a hard F for those who missed it.
Hard F
about Trayshawn. And again, I think just to stay there for a second, and then I know we need to get to talk about the defense, because while it was 17 points for Michigan, I thought they played a really good game for 3/4 of this. And obviously came up big at the end. But just to stick on the Trayshawn thing for a second, this was his best game of his career. And it comes basically in his first time where he's been needed following an incident where he kind of proved he wasn't reliable to a certain degree. I mean, I don't want to be overstepping here, but you spit on a guy's face mask in the middle of the biggest game of the season and you get ejected. And that sort of raises some red flags. And I just think it's really impressive and shows sort of his character, the way he was able to come back. And again, the whole transcript's over on Duck Territory if you want to read everything Dylan had to say. But Dylan probably spoke for about a minute about Trayshawn and kind of what these last couple of weeks have been. And you could just get a sense that this is somebody who has felt terrible about what happened, has atoned for it, and then out on the field has shown real progress. And I don't know if they win this game without his plays. I mean, they probably still find a way. I mean, it was a 21-point win. I don't think it ever got quite that dire, but he was huge today, with passes over the top, and really in that fourth quarter with a couple of those key completions to convert. And you even think back to Dylan clearly really trusts him, because even the series before where they get, the third down stop, that was where he went with the football. It was just unfortunately a little bit short on the pass and incomplete. But this is clearly going to be a guy who, depending upon Tez's involvement and availability, will be a focal point in this offense. And, going forward, you at least know you've got three guys you can rely on. But the part where this gets a little bit hairy to kind of get into the depth a little bit is I just don't know who number 4 is. Like we knew who 1 through 5 were not that long ago, but now without Tez potentially, with Kyler out for a while, Gary still kind of in, I don't really know what you want to say about what Gary's, like, just kind of don't really have a clarity of what his situation is. You've got 3 reliable guys. I just don't know what you have after that. So want to talk some defense, Matt? Like what stood out, unless you had more on the receivers to talk about. I don't know where.
No, 105 yards rushing allowed. That's the second lowest total Michigan has had. And this is what the game plan was. Like, you knew they were going to run the football, and you knew that they were going to run on first down. They were on second down. They were going to run on third down. You knew what was coming. And I don't care that Michigan threw for 165 yards and that Colston Loveland had 112 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. Oregon's game plan was, we're bringing everyone to the box. We're playing one-on-one defense in the secondary. We're making you throw the football. And if you convert the ball, through the air, tip of the hat, good job. Let's line it up and do it again. They had very few explosion plays. They could not go over the top to stretch the defense for Oregon. And anything Michigan wanted to do offensively with running the football was stuff. From the very beginning, Derek Harmon on the very first play just destroyed the line of scrimmage and got a tackle for loss on 5 yards. This is why this game played out the way it did, because Oregon's defense, even though they knew what was coming, they stopped it and forced Michigan to be one-dimensional and the one way that they could not win a football game.
Yeah, Oregon did really well against the ground attack, like Matt just put out there. There were moments of lapses, and they were all like in the middle of the field with Loveland, and it was, for a fan, I could see how it was frustrating, because that's like the only guy you have to pay attention to.
Right.
And
yeah, sure.
He broke free for 2 plays of over, I think, 35 yards, and you're like, well. But still, that kid's like probably a future first-round pick. He's probably the best tight end in the country. He just doesn't have a quarterback that can really throw. But Oregon stuck to their game plan, and they did really well. Michigan had one real touchdown drive where they went a long length of the field, other than the muff punt that I talked about earlier. And, they were sending pressure. They didn't care. Like, they were not concerned about anybody on the outside on Michigan, even though, the two wide receivers caught the touchdown passes. But yeah, beside the point. They felt really comfortable with lining up their Nico Reed and Jabbar Muhammad and letting Taishim and Kobe Savage kind of run out there in center field as safeties, and it worked all game long in the pass attack. And on the defensive front, I thought Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon got great pressure in the interior. I thought Birch actually performed pretty well in his snaps every time that he was on a rundown. Mateo and Ungale got free a little bit. Tatum was good. Tatum actually dropped back in pass coverage a lot. That was very strange, but that might have gone into the Loveland impressive plays during the course of the game, just because Tatum isn't a guy who really operates well in space. But linebackers played well. Oregon at one point, I thought this was almost disrespectful. It was on Michigan's drive where they kicked their second field goal of the game, or their only field goal of the game.
Right.
Excuse me.
The only one.
And it was 2nd and goal. It was after like a loss already, and they brought in Alex Orji, and Oregon didn't have a single cornerback on the field when Orji came in the game. Nico Reed and Jabbar Muhammad both left the field. Their 2 outside corners, quote unquote, were Kobe Savage and Taishim Johnson. They brought all the big boys in, and it ended up being in a TFL, I believe it was, or just like a net negative or net zero gain. So Oregon had this game plan operated. Tosh Lupoi did an excellent job coming into the game. There were some moments, but that happens in literally every single game. And it's just nobody is perfect playing defense, but this was a really physical and impressive game, because that was the main thing I was going to watch was, how does Oregon's defensive line push against Michigan's offensive line? How does Oregon's offensive line push against their defensive line? And they won both of those today.
I think this stat really kind of illustrates how disruptive Oregon was up front. Michigan had 28 rushes in this game. 7 of them were tackles for loss. So a quarter of the time they tried to run the football, play didn't even get back to line of scrimmage. That's pretty good stuff. And, I think, back to the success Michigan had, a couple of the successful plays downfield really came on the plays where they had to do a heck of a lot behind the line of scrimmage to get people open, whether it be flickers or, running back passes or receiver passes. I mean, they really threw a lot of things at Oregon. And I thought it was also really impressive. And by the way, a real ballsy call, I thought, by Michigan on the fourth down there, kind of the game. Not really on the by Michigan to silly. Yeah, I mean silly. So however you want to illustrate. I'm just saying it was different. Dumb, silly, boneheaded, whatever you want to call it. Ballsy for sure.
Those are good.
To do what they did there and take the ball out of their quarterback's hand to try to to put Michigan in a spot to cut it to a 1-score game. And of course, I thought Oregon did a really good job on most of those defensively of staying kind of true to their principles and their checks and their keys and not getting out of position. Obviously, there was the disappointing one where Loveland gets free. He's really a Bryce Betcher tackle in space from that being like a 9-yard gain. But overall, like with everything Michigan tried to do, like I think Oregon had an answer just about every time. And there were a couple of drives where they missed tackles or didn't maybe execute the way they needed to in the back end. But like, I think if you were to watch this game again and you look at, 50 something Michigan snaps, I bet you'd think Oregon had executed what they wanted to do properly on like 45 of them. Like there were just not a lot of lapses out there. There were a couple in pass protection and then the runs in that basically Michigan's last drive that kind of kept it going. But I just thought this was an impressive game from the defense. And again, to kind of step up like they've done all season in the red zone there to kind of salt it away and make sure Michigan couldn't make it interesting late.
I mean, this team knows they're good. And there was a point where in the second half, I think they blitzed like 6 or 7 straight times with a linebacker because they knew Michigan could not throw the football consistently. And if teams, defenses don't be that aggressive unless they're confident in their playmakers on the back end to make the plays on a consistent basis. And, we can agree, we can disagree. I don't know where I land on this, but Gary Danielson on the call was like, this might be the best secondary in the country. And it's hard to argue against. And one-on-ones, and I think a big answer for that, if you're going to agree with Gary Danielson, is the improvements of Nico Reed, Tez Johnson, the additions of Brandon Johnson, and the improvement of Dante Manning. Like we knew Kobe Savage was good. We knew Jabbar Muhammad was going to be elite. Sheem was good at times last year, and then other times he had a couple games where he struggled. But this unit is playing terrific, and this isn't maybe the best test per se because of the skill players and the lack of production and talent at the quarterback position. But when you're able to do what they can do, that's where you can be fun and be aggressive defensively up front with your front seven and blitz 6 or 7 straight times and it not really cost you at all.
Right. Yeah, the blitz and the linebackers, that's something I picked up on too, where it was like Bryce Betcher was just a torpedo for 4 or 5 straight plays right up the middle. And I think I've talked about it on this podcast too, but it's like Brian Flores, who's the old Patriots defensive coordinator, now the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator. He had a thing where it's like you could tell how much he respected a quarterback by how much he blitzed. And it's like, if I blitz a lot, don't respect you as a quarterback. If I drop back and play coverage and really think about if I need to send an extra guy, then you respect him a lot as a quarterback. And yeah, Oregon just sent heat whenever it needed it, whenever it wanted to, frankly. It didn't really need to. I thought their 4-man rush was still getting a lot of pressure regardless. In the secondary, it was a bad quarterback day for Warren, even though he had a couple good throws, and they got a lot of talent back there. It's pretty night and day from what it was last season. Granted, Oregon is not playing the same caliber of quarterbacks week after week after week in the Big Ten as they were last season, the Pac-12. But it's great. I think Nico is really, really good. It was kind of a question mark for the first couple of games of the season. It was like, yeah, he's playing well, but hasn't really gone against a good receiver or a good quarterback yet. And the past couple of weeks, he's just shown up day in, day out, and had a PBU, had a pass breakup, had an interception, done a lot of good things on the other side of the field because everybody already knows about Jabbar Muhammad. Nobody really wants to attack him. So you think, okay, they got to go to Nico Reed. Well, it's like, all right, now where do you go? How do you find this gap? And Oregon has great packages on their defense where run down, it's Bryce Betcher and Justin Jacobs, or Bryce Betcher and Jeff Bossa. And when it's a passing down, they got Devin Jackson and Jeff Bossa, guys who can cover the field sideline to sideline. And it's just a really difficult defense to go against because they seemingly have an answer for a majority of situations, if not every single one, of, hey, we need this package in the field. All right, we got that. Hey, we need this one. All right, cool. We have that too in our back pocket. So really good defensive performance. Every week I fall in love more and more with the defense and what they do. So it's a lot of fun to watch these guys and to see them physically do this against Michigan and against Ohio State earlier this season. Good luck, man. That's all.
Probably could have, I guess, put a cap on the defensive talk here, because I do think we need to talk about Oregon's interior offensive line, the good and the bad there, in a really tough matchup with Michigan's front. But just the last thing I had here was, where does, I'm not going to say Davis Warren was awesome in this game, but I had such low expectations. I actually think he kind of exceeded them. And I was going to ask you guys, like, his second touchdown, that might have been like one of the 2 or 3 best throws an opposing quarterback has thrown against this secondary all season. You know what I mean? Like, it was awesome. It's a tip of the cap throw between 3 guys, and he just put it right where it needed to be. So I think that also kind of puts into perspective of, like, Michigan had to really execute these small margins to score both of their touchdowns. I mean, even the first one, and that was an easier throw, but he's running, he throws it across his body, has to dump it on the inside shoulder. I mean, it's a really good ball. And so you think about it, I mean, the 2 touchdowns they had both came on plays where it's like, that's not bad defense by Oregon. That's good offense for Davis Warren, who, again, is a quarterback that I would say a couple of those plays and some of the throws down the field, certainly to Loveland, I know they were pretty open. Like, he actually, I thought, played a little better than I thought he would, even though the stats will tell you he was 13 for 23 for like 160 yards. What did we think, I guess, collectively of Oregon's interior offensive line? Like, I feel like we spent a ton of time this week leading up talking about Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Josiah Stewart and all these guys Michigan has up front. Did we feel like this is what we wanted to see? Because I was pretty impressed while the starting 5 was in. I know there were some plays where they got the better, but it wasn't really until Kavika Rogers was forced to come in and go face up against maybe the number 1 overall draft pick that things kind of got hairy, and Mason Graham kind of made things not so nice for Oregon's guys up front.
I thought they game planned well. I mean, they played good, but I think they attacked the perimeter, and they did exactly what they did against Illinois. It's exactly the same game plan that Georgia did to Oregon in Dan Lanning's first game as a head coach. They basically said, we're faster than you on the perimeter, and we are going to expose that every single time. And how many short dinks did they do? How many screen passes did they do? They didn't really throw the ball deep. The only real times that they did and they completed it, it was like broken plays. The Trayshawn Holden one late. I think the first Trayshawn Holden catch for like 38 yards or whatever it was, I don't think he was the intended target. Dylan Gabriel stepped up into the pocket after no one was open and saw him streaking across the middle. So, like, I think the offensive line did fine. I think they did great. Harper injury is going to be a concern, obviously, with him not being able to finish the game. But Jordan James ran for 117 yards. It was hard running. That's what you expected. I think they held up well, but I think the game plan more than anything is why Oregon was so successful.
Yeah, I thought the interior offensive line was pretty good, especially with Harper still in the game. It's a tall order, man. You're going against 2 future first-round draft picks and maybe some more down the road. I can't remember the guy's name, but they got some real talent on that defensive front. And overall, I thought the offensive line was good. Not a sack allowed. Gabriel got hit a couple times, and like you mentioned, Eric, Mason Graham had his way with Kavika Rogers, which is a really tough situation for Rogers there going in. But he's a future first round draft pick, and they held him in check, honestly. And then I think Dylan really did a good job today using his legs to just get out of situations, whether that is like stepping up in the pocket or moving around and just buying time for him to either find somebody or throw it away. I thought he was excellent. And I think that's been a progression throughout the season where he was kind of lost the first couple of weeks against like Boise State and Idaho, or if somebody got in on the inside line, like he crumpled or just went the wrong way and turned into a sack or something like that. But last couple of weeks, he's been awesome at just getting out of the pocket and moving and finding a room for himself to make a throw. So overall, I thought the offensive line was good. It was a tall ask. I think they stepped up to it and answered the challenge. And that's probably going to be the best defensive line they see until maybe the playoffs, maybe the Big Ten championship game if they do play Ohio State. So, and I thought they passed again today. So that was a really big concern going into the game. And through the first, second quarter, you're like, this is pretty good. I think they're doing pretty good today. So again, they won that battle. They got a lot of push throughout the day, and a lot of it was up the middle too. On George James's biggest runs were right up the gut, which is not exactly what I expected going into it. So I thought they were pretty darn good.
It's the biggest question mark on the team coming out of non-conference play. They've now played conservatively 2 of the 10 best defensive lines in the country with Michigan and Ohio State. And to your point, Jared, at worst, it's a stalemate. At best, they probably won both. And I want to single out Poncho a little bit just because, this was a different environment for him. They started the game having to go silent count. It was kind of hard to tell on the telecast if they stuck with it in the second half or if they needed to, but there were 2 pre-snap penalties. I don't know if necessarily either of them were on Poncho. I think there was a false start and there was an illegal shift
on Struther.
Yeah. No, I know it was just 1 pre-snap because the other penalty was the illegal man downfield that negated a play we probably should talk about because that's maybe the best catch I've seen an Oregon receiver make in a very long time. But regardless, just to stick on Poncho for a second, like these were the question marks coming in. Like, how would he handle with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant right over the top of him? Would he be off on his snaps? Snaps were like 100% today, no problems. How would he be in terms of protection? I thought he was pretty darn good. Were there pre-snap issues? There was just the one. So, going into that environment with the kind of guys he was lined up against, like I just think him in particular, you got to give him flowers. And obviously both Nashad and Marcus, I thought, played really well. And I think it's a testament to how well Marcus in particular played that you didn't really hear a ton from Graham until he came out of the game. And that's just the worst possible situation for Kavika to come into. I hope Oregon fans don't draw too many conclusions from that because that was just, first you get thrown into a game and you're thrown in on 3rd down against probably the best interior defensive lineman in the country. That's just a tough spot. And he did not step up to the challenge probably like you'd like to see on that particular play. So that'll be a question mark going forward. Dave Iuli, we should note, was available for this game. That's a player who could, in theory, be a replacement guard. He didn't end up playing, but depending on Harper's status going forward, they might need to kind of look and see what they've got there. I would say between Rogers, Iuli, and Janoris Wilson, those seem to be the 3 guys they kind of like there. Obviously, Rogers is the one that got the look tonight.
All right, I think that's going to do it for us, unless you guys have anything parting thoughts. I don't have any.
I got 2 more stats for you.
Go ahead.
According to my research, this is the first time a Big Ten team has beaten Ohio State and Michigan in the same year since Michigan State did in 2015 when they were 12. They finished the year 12-2. Michigan State did. And this is from Tom Fornelli, who tweeted this at halftime from CBS. But for the 5th time in 6 Big Ten games, Oregon has had a 3-score lead at halftime.
Wow.
Not bad. So it kind of goes into the whole 3rd quarter thing maybe being an issue, but probably not because the game is over.
They're the best team in the country.
That's why they're number 1.
That's the way to end it. I think they looked like the best team in the country today. I think they quieted any – I don't know how many people are questioning that besides folks in Georgia, but they look pretty good today.
And Palo Alto of John Willer. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for us here. All right. That's it. Post-game edition. Oregon beats Michigan, improves to 9-0 on the season. We'll be back next week on Monday with a mailbag, getting you ready for Oregon versus Maryland, 4 p.m. kickoff. Go to duckterritory.com for full coverage of this one. But until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.